Sounds great. Thanks.
Well, I am here with Arthur Shelley, and it is an honor and privilege to be with you, Arthur. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thanks. It's great to be with you as well again.
You're very kind, my friend. I've been a fan from the States here relative to you in Australia, and it's been many, many years. So I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself to the rest of the world who don't know about you today.
Well, thank you very much. I keep my activities fairly quiet. Of course, that's fairly easy to do from as far away as Australia. But yeah, I very much believe in human connections and understanding how to bring people together better. And that's why, for many years I've been playing around with this creative metaphor and looking at behavior and behavioral adaptability, which of course very much connects to the kinds of things that you're talking about in your event.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Arthur. Please share more. I mean, you know the themes, you know the narrative. Please share sort of what the metaphor is all about and how it really helps us see, if you will, in the world.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the main development tool that I've put in this area is called the organizational zoo. And what it does is it's a creative metaphor that's fun, and it has these animal characters. And some people sort of dismiss it as trivial because another classification scheme. But actually, it's the opposite of that. When people put you into boxes through psychometric tests and these sorts of things, they'll go, "Oh, you're one of these, therefore this is what you can do, this is what you can't do." But I mean, that's total rubbish. All of us are fully capable of doing a whole range of things, but we have preferences. And maybe our strongest suit is, sort of control and command or aggression, or, a passive behind the scenes supporter. But we can understand what that is, but also we can understand what kind of behavior we need to implement in order to do those other roles, and then being adaptable enough to do that, because every human requires all of these behaviors at some stage. There's a time for criticism, there's a time for support, there's a time for passivity, there's a time for aggression. But if you do the wrong behavior at the wrong time, it's disastrous. But if you can consciously choose which behavior is the most appropriate to do right now with these people, with this group, in this situation, and you can choose that rather than just fall into a pattern, you're amazingly powerful. And of course, early on, it means getting out of your comfort zone. But I mean, you look at COVID, look at the stress and things that are going on because people weren't adaptable. They were comfortably numb in this little patterned world of, I get up at this time, I go to bed at this time, I do this at this time, we have the Friday night drinks. Everything is normal. But that's just such a fallacy. And COVID proved that. COVID didn't cause the problem. COVID highlighted the problem and brought it to the surface. We were living in this, this false normal. There's no such thing as a normal. It's an average. Who thinks they're average?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody thinks they're average, right? And when you know that you're not average, you know that there are unique things that you're good at and some things that you're not so good at. That's exactly why we want, a people-powered society. I'm not so good at this. Si, can you help me? Or do you know someone in your network that can help me out with this? Because, if I try it, it'll take me much longer and it won't be as good. But if I connect with another person and I add value to them and they add value to me, this value exchange can really take all of us to a better place. So that's kind of how it works. And when we connect this with business, in particular technology-enabled business, what actually happens here is you can apply this and get people having the conversations
Mm-hmm.
that actually make a difference. So I know that that's not the way we normally do things. I know that that's not our normal culture, but if we don't act on this, then if we can't behave differently in this particular context for these reasons, then we're not going to be sustainable, or we're not going to be as successful, or we'll be more competitive if we shift what we do from here to here very, very quickly. And they're the kinds of conversations, I call them conversations that matter, talking about the better or more optimal ways to behave and stepping inside or outside your comfort zone from time to time. Take a risk. It's
Very
worth it.
well, very well said. And you know, Arthur, what I would love your commentary and your thinking on this. I mean, as a backdrop, I've known of your work for many years, and I have found the metaphor extremely powerful as a lens to look at who we are and really be able to take that metaphor, leverage conversations, leverage stories around it, and
Yep.
be able to look at that. And as you've done all the work around that metaphor, and it's so powerful, so moving, as you look forward, where do you see the metaphor perhaps evolving or going?
Yeah, it's a really good story question, Si. And questions drive the world, right? Not answers. You know, I try to explain that to my PhDs and master students. You know, it's finding the question and then finding a range of options for that rather than the answer. I mean, if you find the answer, it already exists. And in you know in an anti-fragile world, I mean, the answers don't exist yet. We co-create them as we go forward, and that's what I think is important. What the organizational zoo does is it gives us this ability to shift how we see things, to consciously move into a different mindset. And if you look at the world and how the tool can be used going forward, it gives us a really fun, engaging way to look at our culture, to look at each other, to understand the diversity of the network. I mean, if you've got a whole bunch of people who think just like you know, you're in the wrong place, right? Or you're not connected. I see the world in three layers. I don't even see it as me. The bottom layer is teams. You know, who am I connected to? Who am I working with on this? If I'm working alone, I'm really limiting what I can achieve. So teams is the basic, and teams work on projects together. Then outside that, you've got communities. What projects are happening in your community? Is that a professional community, a business community, a social community, you know, a local government? What's the communities in which your teams are operating? And then outside that, like we're doing now, networking. You know, we catch up once, twice a year, we say hello, you know, and quite often we don't even have something particular. We don't have a specific team or project that we're working on for a particular community. But today, we are acting as a team to develop a knowledge object or a knowledge artifact for a community that cares about, you know, technology-enabled business that's human-powered and is creating a better society. That is a really powerful network objective. It's not something one team can do.
Yeah.
It's not something one community can do. We've got to connect the communities through the networks to do that. The zoo helps us to be able to enable that.
So Arthur, I'd like you to comment and sort of share your perspective. And I'll tell you very openly, I've leveraged metaphors, familiar metaphors, and this is what makes it's an extremely approachable metaphor, a familiar metaphor that gives us a degree of certainty because we're familiar with it, to leverage that metaphor to deal with the uncertainty.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on kind of how that dynamic and that paradox unfolds, Arthur?
Yeah, it's a really good point. If you think about it, language itself is a metaphor. When you say a word, it's not literally the thing, it's a name of the thing. It represents the thing. So, you know, I can say, well, you know, this is a coffee mug. Now, in your mind, when I say coffee mug, people see all sorts of different things, and they probably see their coffee mug rather than this rather artistic, you know, creative one. But at least we're brought together to understand the object or the scenario or the situation. Metaphor is extremely powerful. Like language, we can't communicate without language. Uh, um, but metaphor is extremely powerful because it represents something that you have an image of, something that brings a degree of familiarity to what we're talking about. So when I start talking in metaphor, you can come to understand the sense and meaning of what I'm talking about, because there may not actually be words to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at, you know, you look at COVID. You know, it took them a while to come up with the word pandemic.
Yeah.
But once people described the word pandemic, that word then represented. People could go and say, "Oh, what's a pandemic?" And "Oh my God, look, it happened in you know in 1918." And you know they then got a sense of meaning years that's been talked about. So when we talk about behavior, you know, I say to you, you're aggressive or you're assertive. You know, two people think they're the same thing. Or, you know, for someone's aggressive is really quite passive to somebody else.
Hmm.
So when you represent that with imagery and you build this safe, you know, psychologically safe language around it, because I'm not talking about Sai and Arthur, I'm talking about a lion. We say, well, okay, a lion is a behavior. You know, I'm not saying Sai is a lion. I'm saying, you know, Arthur and Sai need to be very lion about how we do this, because it's a very aggressive thing that we need to do. Or, you know what, the lion would totally destroy this because it'd be too aggressive, too controlling, too commanding. What we really need is something more like an eagle, something more, you know, like strategic and from above. And so the metaphor, and all metaphors work in this way, they take something very complex and simplify it, but not, well, as Einstein said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler.
Yeah.
You know, so you've still got the sense of it. You still know that it's complex, but you can understand it in a simplified way.
Very, very well said. And Arthur, I'd love for you to comment on, as you look at leaders in respectfully the new world as we're moving forward and what have you. Can you comment on how you think they ought to really leverage metaphor, stories, and any other things that you'd like to blend in order to better navigate the unknown, the uncertainty, the randomness that we may potentially confront?
Yeah, one of the quotes I love was, I think it was Groucho Marx. It was one of the Marxists. He said, "I would never want to be a member of a club that would accept me as a member." Um, you know,
Yes.
and there's a particular style of leadership, particularly in the Western world, at the moment, that is very, you know, self-driven, egotistical, and you can see that they need to be kind of that nature in order to get through the system. But we know the system is broken, right? We talk about that in Anti-Fragile. We talk about, you know, it's not a sustainable system that is actually giving humanity or society the best outcomes. But unfortunately, the nature of the system, there's a particular aggressive self-control, lack of self-control, I should
Hmm.
say, you know, a self-interested controlling style that rises to the top. And look, there are exceptions, but we, on average, if there is such a thing, uh, um, there's a certain style that have elevated, and the system is managing itself. You look at, you know, the stock markets, you know, are now heavily manipulated. Communication. I mean, there's communication or reputation consultants.
Hmm.
You know, if you need to hire someone to manage your reputation, quite frankly, you're not being a very good leader, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
and and the communications of a lot of the modern leaders are so manicured, because if they actually said what they thought, no one would vote for them. You know, so they'll say the things to the minority of voters that will get them across the line, you know, because we've got these polarized systems. And to me, leadership is the biggest topic that I consult around the zoo on.
Mhm.
Or, you know, we play the zoo games. I've got actually on the blog, on the organizational zoo website, there's several uh, posts around leadership and leadership styles and what that means and the impacts that it has. But I do a thing called the behavioral DNA. And you give the people the card deck, 26 characters, and they're all playing cards with, you know, each of these behaviors on it. And people sort them out into these layers. So they go, well, of a leader, what would I expect? What must they have? And then what would also be desirable? And then in the third layer, the what would I tolerate? And then what would I reject? And I'm not telling them anything other than say, here, sort these cards out. So they play this game and they have a lot of fun and there's laughter and, you know, all this stuff going on. But within 15 minutes, they characterize what they think is good leadership or bad
Mhm.
leadership or leadership in crisis, you know, good leadership for complex situations versus simple, you know. And the idea is they do this very quickly. And it's actually not the final result that's important, it's the conversations, but at least they can get the final result. And you can combine these into a visual, a single visual of all of the results from the room, from all of the teams, to show a community result. And it's really, really powerful as a conversation object. And it's the conversations and the engagement and the shared perspectives. They can see the diversity. Oh my God, you see it very differently from me, Si. geez, I never realized that about
Yeah.
you, you know, geez, you're a softie, aren't you? You know, and it's like, you know, but you can have huge insights come out in those conversations.
Yeah. It, it's very powerful because there's a separation between the individual and the behavior. So that
Mm.
disassociates the judgment aspect very, very openly, and begins to allow us to really navigate that space together versus be at each other in many
Yeah,
ways.
yeah. 100%. I mean, what you've got, you know, if you ask in a room of people, what do you think makes good leadership? What happens is the loudest people give their answer, which is normally the, you know, the stronger, more aggressive styles. And you know, like a more introverted person sitting in the room, they go, "Oh, there they go again," you know. Well, and they just detach, right?
Hmm.
But what this does is you put people in groups of three. So you can have like 10 groups in a group of 30 people, you'll have 10 groups of three. And three is a really important number because in a group of two, one almost invariably will dominate the other. Once you get beyond a group of four, there's some people that are engaged and some that aren't. So that group of three, you know, it's small enough and intimate enough for us to be, you know, sharing, but it's the third leg of the wheel imbalances, you know, a control relationship. So it becomes, if one is controlling, the other two kind of step up a bit because they feel more empowered. So what you get is a much more authentic and honest answer about, you know, what the groups think. And then when you combine those, you know, and you see all 10 groups and where they thought the same and where they thought differently, and you know which characters ended up in all four categories. You know, one group saying, "No way, you know, if leader was like that, you know, I'm out of there," and someone else is saying, "Why, you know, my goodness, if we don't have a leader that does this, you know, then it'll go to hell." You know, and then you say, "Well, okay, this group and this group, let's have that debate. Let's talk about, you know, why that's the case, but constructively and
Hmm.
with respect." And then what inevitably happens is they each see different scenarios in which the other one was right. You know, it's not that that's always right and that's always
Hmm.
wrong. It's well, that would work there, but I was thinking of this over here. But yeah, but what we said, yours wouldn't work either. And it's just magic to
Yeah.
watch it happen. You know,
Yeah.
the flow is, and it's not just sharing existing knowledge. It's actually co-creating new knowledge and new insights right there and then in the moment.
Yeah.
It's lovely. It's lovely to watch.
The magic is in the conversation, exactly, as it
Oh,
unfolds.
100%.
Yeah. So it's I love hearing you describe it. So so Arthur, there's a so I really want you to comment on this, because this is when I first found you. This perhaps is one of the most personal questions I'm going to ask, if you will. When I first discovered the book, and I saw your name and I had no idea who you were, I said, okay, I want to understand this man. You know, I really want to understand this man. And then as I got to know you a little bit, there is a calming wisdom that you bring forth, my friend. What makes you tick? What makes you tick?
It's a very lovely thing to say, and I I think thank you, by the way.
You're
Uh,
most
um,
welcome.
I
And you know me, if I didn't mean it, I wouldn't say it. You know me
yeah,
well enough.
I know. Yeah, 100%. You know, we've chatted enough times to keep chatting. You know, there's lots of people that, you know, you chat a few times and then all of a sudden you're busy when the phone rings or whatever, you know, and you don't want to be rude, but you know, you think, you know what, we are as strong as our network, and you know, we don't have time to engage with everyone, so we've got to be selective about who we engage with. And you know, you become who you consume, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, and which is a good thing. And I think what makes me tick is, you know, desperately wanting to see a better world. You know, I create what I've created, so I'm kind of semi-retired, right? I kind of don't work unless I really have to, you know. But unfortunately, intellectually, I really have to. But financially, it doesn't matter. So, you know, what I'm really wanting to see is to take what I've learned in my, you know, nearly 60 years, and find audiences or people or participants who get it and want to do it, you know, to get out there and support. So I do a lot of mentoring of people in about, you know, 15 different countries, and you know, I talk to people and they ask questions, and you know, there's network in Russia of entrepreneurs basically, and look, boy, are they really feeling it at the moment. The COVID is really sort of ripped their businesses apart. They've got nothing left, and so to try and help them to co-create ideas and shift mindsets to do things that can make a difference in society. I thought that Canadian brewery, the Toronto brewery, ginery that makes gin.
Yeah.
They shifted to making sanitizer. So they're good at distilling alcohol. These are the kinds of things that I do with the zoo and my other tool, Knowledge Succession, which I published a few years ago, looking at VUCA, complexity, reflective practice, conversation, bringing all of these things together. So that you can help people. So that's the answer to your question. I think I really want to see people find better ways of doing things, and looking forward to become, so many people are just in a patterned tactical, sort of world that they assume is normal and nice and nothing will change. I mean, nothing could be, further from the truth. We live in a very anti-fragile, constantly changing world that, as soon as you get comfortable, you know that you're at risk.
Yeah. Oh, I lost your sound, Arthur. Oh. Can you hear me?
What the circumstances are. So, and they're the things that are all over the place. And insurance companies are in a really bad way, So I want to help people. I want to help people be more comfortable, but be more comfortable in uncertainty, to understand that it's okay to feel a bit nervous.
Can you hear me, Arthur? We lost your sound a little bit. Can you hear me?
No, I think we just dropped out there at the end. So I don't know whether you got that last sentence or not. So I might
be more comfortable in uncertainty, I think is what you mentioned.
Yeah, to be more comfortable.
Yeah, we keep losing the sound, but hopefully you can hear me, Arthur.
Yeah, I've got you again now.
Okay, excellent. So I'll tell you, there's a lot I want to ask very, very openly. There's a tremendous amount. I'm gonna ask two questions in one, because I think it'll be very valuable, I think, for our listeners to really kind of embrace the way you approach this. If you could look back and give yourself some advice, pre-COVID, etc., and then if you could look forward 10 years, call it 5 years, 10 years, after this begins to really manifest even deeper, what would you say to your two selves there, my friend?
Yeah, they're great questions. You always think that you did as well as you possibly could do, sort of at the time. And I remember there was a really, really difficult project. It was like a $1 billion project that we were working on. I was a senior executive in a multinational organization, and I was really swimming against the current, like you wouldn't believe. I mean, most of my career I swam against the current because I was trying to disrupt patterns and do positive change, strategic change, as opposed to tactical reaction. But there was one thing that I was just so passionate about, but even the senior leaders that were the so-called sponsors, were just letting it go along. And I gave them 10 reasons why it wasn't going to work. When we kind of switched it on, so to speak, when we launched this new program. And on the launch, they all just said, "Oh, look, you're a non-team player. We've all agreed," and all the consultants were saying you're wrong. And I was just really, really deeply stressed because I just knew that this wasn't going to work. And on the day that everything sort of went live, so to speak, it wasn't just a computer system; it was computers and process and restructures and everything all at once. And the first 8 things on the list of 10 all went wrong, and the only reason the last 2 didn't happen was that everything was so stuffed up that they couldn't get that far. And I really resisted. I told you so. I think I was at work like for about 100 hours straight, trying to sort of fix the broken elements of what went wrong. And no one ever said, you were right. You know, it was like, you know, and the guy who was my boss wanted to give me a bad performance review for, you know, not fighting hard enough or not doing enough or whatever. And, you know, at that stage, the thing I did wrong there was I probably should have just gone with the flow and, you know, fixed a few things in background before the event rather than trying to fix everything all at once. And I think we've got to really prioritize what it is that we can do, and do the things we can rather than fighting against the things that we can't change. And, you know, I think in doing that, you can change enough to at least swerve. You know, the Titanic grazes the iceberg rather than plows into it, you know, and I think if we can swerve the Titanic a little bit, then, you know, we can minimize the damage sometimes. And sometimes we can create some real magic in the world. And that's really where the future question comes. And what I'm really trying to do now is, if more people understood behavioral adaptability, if they understand that, you know, it is perfectly normal and in fact required to step outside your comfort zone on a regular basis, the more comfortable you become, the more you should be aware that that's a risk to yourself and to others. The more that you will listen and engage with others, even those that you don't agree with. I mean, I still read the writings of some of the leaders that I just philosophically differ with, because I need to know where they're thinking so that we can then swerve. You know, and if you totally ignore the voices that are not just in groupthink with yourself, then you really are placing yourself and everyone around you at risk. You've got to be out there and picking up, but you can't do everything, right?
Yep.
Find the ones that are making the most difference, positive or bad, and then seeing what you need to do about it. That's probably where I am now.
Very nice, very nice. You know, the thing that attracted me to the organizational zoo is I've always said that the human animals can be the most elegant and potentially the most destructive animal in nature. So the zoo immediately captured my attention, and I love the way that, you know, you talk about patterned behavior and the way we disrupt that. I talk about habits, right? And we're creatures of habit, and how we disrupt that. And there's a great wisdom that you've brought to the world, my friend, and I'm sure many have benefited and many will continue to benefit. So, you know, with that, I really express appreciation, and any sort of closing thoughts before we sign off, my good friend.
Yeah, no, thank you for your kind words again. And you know, if you feel completely comfortable, get over it. That's probably the main thing I can say. And, you know, well, how do you, you know, challenge yourself constantly to evolve your behavioral adaptability? I mean, there are some of the, you know, animals in the zoo that I choose not to be 99.99% of the time. But there are just times when I need to do that. And I'll tell you a little tiny story from my wife. You know, one of the characters is a nematode, which is like a parasite. They just take and take and take, and my. When we go on holidays, I just want to absorb as much of different cultures as I can. And, you know, we've traveled to, you know, over 60 countries in our lifetime, and, you know, we go and we look and observe. But, you know, my wife once said to me, you should read a bit of your own stuff sometimes. And maybe she was a little more blunt about it than that, but you should read a bit of your own sort of stuff sometimes. She said, you need to be a nematode. She said, your idea of a holiday is you go to 50 countries and you sort of engage and share stuff with all of them. My idea is a holiday is I sit on the beach and ask the waiter to get me a daiquiri. You know, she said, be a nematode occasionally, you know, and she's right. You know, sometimes you've got to switch off and just take what comes, you know, but I find that hard to do, but I've got to get better at it, right?
Exactly. You are a genuine human being, my friend, all around, and it's an honor to be acquainted and know you the way I sincerely call you a dear friend all around. So thank you for the opportunity, and you know, I look forward to the future.
My great pleasure. I look forward to another discussion. Good luck with your event. I hope it goes really well. And there's nothing more powerful than what you're sharing with your friends right now. So congratulations on a great job.
Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you.